welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder, and today's episode is brought to you by Original Sprout. Original Sprout carries safe, effective, and pediatrician-tested shampoos, conditioners, styling, and body care products produced and packaged in the USA. And today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. The Milky's Softies nursing pads have 3 layers of plush natural fiber that protect against leaks, and they're reusable. But we'll hear more from our sponsors later. And I want to tell you that sponsors make this podcast possible. So if you can, please give your business to our sponsors. We have a sponsor page at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com that you can check all of our sponsors. And if you need something, please check there because they do a lot for this podcast. They help bring this to your living rooms or your cars or your wherever you're listening. And when you're there at Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, scroll down to the bottom and enter your email address, and you'll get the episode sent right to your inbox. But right now, Dianne has our review of the week.
Yes, I do. And it comes from iTunes. So thank you for leaving it there on iTunes because that helps us a lot. This comes from Betty PMCC. And she says, helpful info and reassuring. This podcast has been such a great find. I am now almost 6 months into my breastfeeding journey with my first baby and have found the information on this podcast to be very helpful. There is an episode for every subject that could cause you anxiety. And if you are really passionate about breastfeeding, this podcast will help you succeed and feel supported, whether you have a supportive community around you or not. Thanks from a new mama and her chubby little breastfeeding baby.
Aww.
I know. Thank you so much for this. And we really do try to make sure we cover all the things. I know in the beginning when we first started this podcast, we're like, all right, we're going to be out of topics in 6 months. But
I know.
there's still some stuff that comes up and I'm like, how do we not have an episode on this? We really try hard. Plus when people send us reviews and suggestions and things, we put that on our list. We have an ongoing list because we want to make sure that we're talking about the things that are going on in your breastfeeding life right now. So thank you so much. I am so glad that you found us. And I hope that if people listen when they're pregnant, that they find it helpful to kind of have an idea of what to expect. If you find us when you're already in your breastfeeding journey, definitely go back and listen to other episodes because you might be able to find some stuff that go, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm totally validated by this episode. So, and we would love to hear your comments about it too. So shoot us a review. You can send us an email, post something on Instagram, follow us. I hope you're following both of us on Instagram and Facebook. I'm Dianne O'Cassidy on Instagram. And of course, Abby's Badass Breastfeeder everywhere she goes. So that's really just her name. You should change it legally.
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
I'll just change it.
Just sign your checks, the Badass Breastfeeder. And that's it. And today,
that's why I was mailing these packages and to family, but I was using the business, because I sell shirts and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so I was just using the PayPal, the same account. So I'm sending stuff to my sister and to my mother-in-law, and it says from the Badass Breastfeeder, and I'm like, well, they'll know.
Yeah, they know.
They'll know what's from.
It's totally fine. But today we're going to talk about getting your period back.
Yeah, I love this topic because what's normal?
Nothing.
All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. All of it and nothing.
Yeah, that's pretty much how, it's
yeah,
whatever happens, happens. I kind of feel like it's like pumping, it's there's no consistency and you can expect anything.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it too with weaning, how some people are sometimes people will message me and they'll be like, I weaned a year ago and I can still express some milk. Is that normal? Is something wrong? And I'm like, it's just fine. It's normal. It's normal where there's no milk right away and then there's milk 2 years later. You just don't, your body just does stuff. We don't know why.
And it's different with every baby.
Right. Different with every baby and different from your friend and different from your mom or your, whoever. Yeah.
And then you got to think too about some of the stuff that's happening. Are you on a birth control? Because that's going to impact it. What were your periods like before you had your baby? Were they regular? Or were you on birth control all the time, then went off, then got pregnant, and maybe you don't even know how your periods are supposed to be? There's so many variables here.
Right. So let's talk about what happens. So you get pregnant.
Yes.
And then your period stops. However, I do hear these stories about how people are pregnant and they still get their period. So
Yeah,
I don't know
once in
what
a while you
magical
do
stuff
hear
is that.
that. Yeah. I don't know. We can't cover that because I have no
No,
idea.
because
Yeah.
generally your period stops and
Yep.
then you have your baby. And there's usually like a period of time where you're bleeding.
Yes.
That is not your period.
No, it is not. And sometimes people have a little bit of breakthrough. Like they'll bleed for a little bit. Because I know you even said you bled for quite a while. I think I
Oh my
bled for 2 or
God.
3 weeks and then stopped and then started again with my first baby. Started again. And then, then I read that, the more you do, that could kick back in again. So sometimes it happens to people and they go, oh my gosh, am I getting my period at 4 weeks? It's like, no, you're just doing too much.
Right, right.
You
And
bled
there's
a long
still that just postpartum bleeding.
time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that postpartum bleeding, man, that's nasty stuff. Yeah, with Jack, I bled for, it was about 3 months.
Ugh.
It was terrible. And they were just like, yeah, that's a lot, but, it'll stop. And I don't think I was doing too much. It was just, the whole birth was traumatic. So the whole situation was bad. And then, see, this is why I feel like some people can remember exactly when they got their period back. But that finally stopped. And then I think I got my period back, I don't know, like 8 months or something.
So maybe like was
Or maybe
Jack like sleeping better or sleeping longer stretches maybe or
probably. Yeah, it was
yeah.
probably something like that because I do remember Josh and I saying like, because we had an episode about where we were talking about this on our birth control episode.
Mm-hmm.
Where like it was probably like, well, we first had Jack and then I was like, well, we're never doing that again. We're never doing that again. We're never having a baby. We're never having sex. We're never nothing. Nothing's ever happening again. It was just like my vagina. I was like, that is an exit from now on. That's
Yeah.
nothing's happening there ever again. And then I healed and by like 6 months we were like, so are we going to have another baby or not? And then I was kind of like, when is my period going to come back? Can I make my period come back? Because this is another thing we need to talk about.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are like, well, I'm trying to have another baby and my period's not back yet. What can I do? And so, okay, well, so that I just covered like 8 topics. But
Follow along, everybody. Follow along.
yeah, follow. So your period basically is not postpartum bleeding. That's just going to happen. That generally will clear up before 3 months, like it did with me.
Yeah, typically, yeah.
And then your period will come back when your body is ready for your period to come back. So let's talk about like why. Let's talk about why there's no period, and let's talk about that first.
Yeah.
Why do we not have a period?
Because when you're breastfeeding, and this is for breastfeeding, this is not if you're formula feeding. So it's going to be different. Like if you have friends or family members that formula fed and they say to you, oh, I got my period back at, a month or 2 months or whatever, they might not realize that you don't get yours. So you can't compare the two. If you are breastfeeding, the hormones are different. So breastfeeding keeps your body from ovulating. If you are breastfeeding on demand, you're breastfeeding every couple of hours, very frequently, that is going to adjust hormones that help you ovulate, and you're just not going to ovulate, which means you don't get your period. But when your baby starts maybe stretching things out, or maybe you return to work, so you're not breastfeeding on demand like you were before. Maybe your baby starts sleeping longer stretches through the night. Maybe you started solid foods. Any of those things can kind of alter your breastfeeding, and then you can ovulate all of a sudden and have your period, or ovulate and get pregnant right away and never even have your period, but you ovulated. So you can there's lots of little ways it can happen, but it can be different with each baby. And if you talk to a mom that has had more than one baby, she might tell you, oh yeah, the first time I got my period back at 6 months. Second time I got it back at 4. Third time, I got it back at 8 months. Like, it could be different every single time.
Yeah, and it can really vary. I mean, some people will go like 2 years.
Yeah. Now, for my first, actually, no, that's a lie. It was for both. I went like a year, but mine was not regular beforehand. So I don't think you could really go by that. And I was just like, oh, this is great. Like, this is great. I'm not getting my period back. But I now that, like, I know what I know, because back then I knew nothing about anything. So now that I know what I know, my periods were very, very irregular. And in fact, I had gone, because I was a distance runner and I was like in the Army and everything. So I had gone like a couple of years without even having one at all. So, and then all of a sudden had one and got pregnant. So of course mine was not going to go back to anything regular, because it really wasn't before that either. So that's something to keep in mind, that if you were kind of irregular before, you might not be regular again now that you're, postpartum.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can, and this is where people start to, because some, I also was very much enjoying not having a period, and then when it came back, I was like, oh man.
I know.
But some people are wanting to start having their next baby and want to try to manipulate this process.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I guess there's mixed reviews about that, because I remember when I first had Jack, and then we were starting to think about this, and I was thinking about this manipulating my body, manipulating my cycle. And I asked in a Facebook group about it, and somebody said to me, they were like, what's your priority? Like, what are your priorities right now? And I had to say, like, Jack, like breastfeeding Jack is my priority.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I really had to think about, like, okay, well, so I don't want to, start doing those, because there's all of those, people will come in with the suggestions like, well, just start feeding them lots of food, or like, try to get them to sleep through the night, or go to a hotel and like spend the night away. Like things to kind of like basically interrupt breastfeeding to try to get your body to start ovulating.
Right.
And that's tricky business. Because you're generally working really hard to get breastfeeding to start to work really well. And then if you start messing with it, it's not like when you're, if your child starts eating a lot of solid foods, I'm not saying that breastfeeding is over. But just the idea of manipulating it is, I don't know, think about your priorities. What are they right now?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because we have had people contact us about this, and I know I've had people say it to me too, where it almost feels like I need to fix this for them. Like they'll be like, well, I really want to start getting, I want to start working on my next baby. So what do I do? And it's like, I don't know what to tell you about that. Like, I don't have a magic wand for ovulation. So I really don't know what to tell you, because if you don't want to wean, I think the way you just put it is great. Like, what are your priorities right now? But we have to really remember that primitively, breastfeeding has been the way cultures have spaced their children. And that's just how it's always been, like throughout history. Babies have been spaced because of breastfeeding. And that's just like, sometimes we can't manipulate that.
Yeah, breastfeeding on demand is the way that your body and your baby were kind of wired to be, right? And so if you're breastfeeding on demand and you're doing that and your body hasn't ovulated yet, you haven't gotten your period back yet, that's kind of the signal that your body's just not ready.
Mm-hmm.
And then and it will, at some point it will come back. It will come back. It might be inconvenient timing for you, which is annoying. It's annoying. I want to control nature. I do too. I do. I wish I could just control like what's happening with my body, except some things are just so completely out of your control. And so I think it's, that's also, your body needs time too,
Oh yeah,
to
it
like,
does.
it's a way of like spacing babies out. It's also a way of having your body heal and recuperate from being pregnant and birthing and breastfeeding, and that time period.
And now, when you do get your period back, say for example, you get your period back at 8 months, right? Um, you might get it, and then you might not see it again for, 45, 50 days, and then maybe you'll have it again. It might not be regular anymore, or it might not
Right,
be
and that
regular right away either, which is
Right,
also
that
another thing that's frustrating, because then you can't really depend on when you're going to get it.
Yeah, and that worries people sometimes too. They're like, I got my period and then this month I didn't get it. Is something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. There's not something wrong. It's just irregular right now. Or you get it and then 2 weeks later you get it again.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, that
Yeah.
was always like and you know what I figured out too with the 3 months of bleeding? That totally removed the entire 9 months of not getting a period.
Oh my God.
It just like made it all up again. And I was like, no, that's not fair.
No, it's like you're being punished. Mother Nature hates us as women. So difficult.
Why don't we take a break and then come back and talk more about periods?
Yes, perfect. I have more stuff to say.
Me too.
Good.
Today's episode is brought to you by Original Sprout. Original Sprout carries safe, effective, and pediatrician-tested shampoos, conditioners, styling, and body care products produced and packaged in California, USA. Their hair and body baby wash is made with gentle moisturizing ingredients such as organic calendula and refreshing rosemary extract. Rosemary helps stimulate scalp circulation and calm cradle cap and eczema. This hair and body baby wash is ideal for babies, children, and adults alike. All of Original Sprouts products are paraben and phthalate free, vegan, and cruelty free. Their proprietary formulas contain nourishing extracts from fruits, vegetables, and flowers that the whole family can enjoy. They are not just for babies anymore. Check out the entire line at originalsprout.com and use code BADASS for 25% off of your order. Originalsprout.com, code BADASS, 25% off. Today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. Have you ever leaked through your bra or shirt? Well, it's a problem no more. The Milky Softy nursing pads have a 3-layer design that guards against leaks without adding bulk or puffiness to your bra. A plush natural fiber layer rests lightly against your skin and wicks moisture away quickly. The inner microfiber layer is ultra absorbent, and the outer layer is microbe and leak resistant. But aren't they bulky? Will I look like I have a sock stuffed in my shirt? No. The Softies nursing pads are contoured in shape to provide a better and more comfortable fit. Designed by breastfeeders for breastfeeders, Softies keeps us dry and comfortable, confident and proud. And this is the best part. The nursing pads are machine washable and reusable, so you aren't creating garbage and wasting money. Head to fairhavenhealth.com. That's FAIRHAVEN health.com and use code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. Fairhavenhealth.com, code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. And these sponsors and their promo codes can be found in our show notes under this episode at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. Our show notes will also include further information about things we talk about in the episode. And also at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, you can find our breastfeeding resources, all of our other episodes, and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
And who doesn't want to do that? Come on.
Seriously.
In our virtual world right now.
Exactly. Everybody needs that right now. We need
all
of our online support, all the online support we can get. And it's kind of easier. Like if you're, I guess it's nice if the lactation consultant can come to your house, but like if you have to go to an office or something, it's kind of nice if you have a newborn where you don't have to leave your house.
I know.
Take advantage of the technology.
It's fantastic.
Okay. And so our shout out of the week The shout out of the week goes to Lene's Birth Services. She can be found on Instagram at Crimson Doula Lene. So that's Crimson, CRIMSON _ doula _ Lene, LENE. And this page is, she describes herself as native holistic doula of color, home birth assistant, with a BA in psychology, spiritual knowledge seeker, animal lover, wordsmith, explorer. Based in Queens, New York. You can head to lenesbirthservices.com. The newsfeed on Instagram is beautiful and very educational. Lots of information about breastfeeding and birth. And the her services include pregnancy, birth, and postpartum care. So check them out, lenesbirthservices.com and crimson _ doula _ Lene on Instagram.
Fantastic.
And that's all I got.
That's awesome. All right, what else you got for periods?
Well, so for periods, yeah. I mean, what I think because I get contacted a lot by people wondering what is normal. It's been so long, is it normal? It came back and then went away, is it normal? It's really heavy and then sometimes light, is it normal? So I would say if you have not had children and your period is acting irregular, I would say you might want to get that checked out. If you had a baby and your period, and you're like breastfeeding, you're in this like, postpartum time, really everything is normal.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a weird time. Your hormones are like freaking out. Your body is trying to figure out what to do again. It's trying to find its rhythm again. Because that's what bodies do, right? They try to find rhythm.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to find the rhythm again. So you're going to see all kinds of different things. And now, obviously, if you're concerned, definitely talk to your healthcare provider. But generally, these things are not a concern. And you can go a real long time. I mean, I hear people really... I think at 18 months, 2 years, people, I would get worried too. I mean, what's going on? Where's my period? And that's unusual. I mean, it doesn't usually go on that long, but it does happen. I've had people contact me like, where is it? Yes, I'm still breastfeeding. I'm still all of this. And I'm like, it'll come.
And this is kind of another one of those topics that doesn't get addressed necessarily because you're really not thinking about it. You're not thinking about when you're pregnant, you're not thinking about saying to your OB or your midwife or, your provider or anybody, what's going to happen with my period? What's going to happen, and getting real education on it. What they tell us is you're recovered in 6 weeks to go back and do whatever it is you want to do. You want to start working out, you can do it in 6 weeks. You're going to go back to work, you can do it in 6 weeks. If you had a C-section, make it 8 weeks. Do you want to have sex again? You can start doing that at 6 weeks. Like, we're really not recovered in 6 weeks.
No.
It really takes a lot longer than that. But we kind of like have this, idea in our heads that, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I should be good to go.
Yeah, because that's the number. I mean, that's the number that we picked in our society. And that's generally when a lot of people are going back to work. So we just named it.
Yeah.
Not based on any kind of science or anything that's going on with your body.
And everybody's so different. So we really can't use that as any kind of guideline because your hormones are still going to be all over the place. And then, like I said, if you started a birth control or anything like that, that's going to impact it too. But it's going to be when your body says it's time. And sometimes you can't control that. Like we were saying earlier, as much as we want to, might not be able to.
Right.
So it's kind of, it's frustrating. One thing I wanted to make sure we did talk about is it's very common that if you do get your period back while you are breastfeeding, that it can cause a dip in supply. And a lot of moms don't realize that, or it makes them very, very nervous. So what happens is, because those hormones are fluctuating during ovulation, it can cause a dip in supply because things are just like your system is just doing some stuff. So you might see a dip in supply around ovulation time, and then it kind of kicks back in around, after you have your period. And it's different for everybody. Some women never notice it. I think the women that notice it more are the breastfeeders that are doing like pumping more, like they're back to work, they're pumping more. And you notice that dip with pumping, but you don't necessarily notice it when you're breastfeeding because your
That's a
baby's
good
just
point.
feeding.
That's a good point. Yeah, you might have a dip in your supply. But if you're breastfeeding, you just don't notice it.
Right. You're just like, oh, the baby's eating more frequently, or the baby's going through a growth spurt or whatever. Like, you don't really notice it. But if you're pumping and especially if you're counting like every ounce because you're working and sending milk for your baby, then you're just like, oh my gosh, why did I only pump, a couple ounces today when I normally pump 4, for example, but I only pumped 2. What's going on? Then you're going to notice it. And then I get calls from moms that say, hey, what's going on with my supply? First question I ask is, did you get your period back yet? Because that can definitely impact it. So there is something that you can do about that. There's some great information on Kellymom. Of course, I'll link to this, about taking a calcium magnesium supplement during that time, because that's supposed to help. And it's one of those things where it's like some people say it helps, some people don't notice much of a difference, but you could always give it a shot. If it's something that you're really struggling with, you could always try doing a calcium magnesium supplement. And the dosages and all of that stuff are on Kellymom, because it is very specific on like when you should take it and how much you should be taking and all of that. But that can help. But that is a normal process, that your supply dips a little bit with ovulation and your period, and it comes back. It's not like, okay, now every month it's going to dip and get lower and lower and lower and lower and lower. It just dips and then it comes back up again.
Because this is all hormonal.
It's all hormonal.
Yeah, pumping is such a mind fuck.
Oh, it is.
It's like you're not supposed to know. It's like 24-hour news on your body. Like you're not supposed to be getting news 24 hours a day, because it's just, we're not set up like that. But, if you sit around and watch 24-hour news, you're like, oh my God, in your body, it's like you're pumping. It's like you're getting 24-hour news like on your body. It's like, oh my God, it's too much. It's too much. And it's like, if you're just breastfeeding, there's so many like things that you can just not have to, you don't have to pay attention to it, or you're just not presented with the information. And with pumping, you're presented with so much information. It's like too overwhelming.
It's more than we need.
Yeah, it's more than we need. And it's, pumping is obviously totally necessary for many people. It's it's just something that we have to do. But then you also have to deal with the fact that you have to deal with all the consequences of that too. It's so stressful.
And it's not accurate, just like many news stations are not.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, the information you're getting isn't always, it's fake news.
Pumping is fake news, by the way. Yes, that's exactly how we should put it.
This is such a timely podcast.
I know. Perfect. But it is a great way to put it, because it is just like, yeah. And then you go through every month going, oh my gosh, is it my supply dip again? Is it because I'm getting my period? Is it not? Is it going to happen? Is it not? Like, you just start freaking out with it.
Yeah. And it's not a time, you don't have to go like, oh God, I got to quickly supplement. My baby's not getting enough. Your baby can handle these fluctuations too.
Mm-hmm.
They're normal fluctuations for your body. So, your baby is definitely wired to go with it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just, I think we always think, oh my gosh, the baby's going to starve. They're not. They're going to make up for it. They're going to feed the way they're supposed to feed to get your body to, kick it into gear. I mean, we've been doing this for millions of years. We just don't trust the process.
Yeah.
And it works. It really does work. And there's a lot of women that breastfeed through their second pregnancy or third pregnancy or fourth pregnancy or whatever. A lot of families do that, and it's definitely possible to get pregnant while you're still breastfeeding and then to continue on breastfeeding throughout that pregnancy. It's possible. You can do that.
Well, that's another good point, actually, real quick, is, if so if you get your period back when your baby is like, less than a year and you do get pregnant, that's another thing to think about too, because you can breastfeed through your pregnancy, but your supply will likely dip a
Yeah,
lot.
absolutely.
And so you will not be able to have a full milk supply for a baby that is under the age of 1 who really needs to be having solely breast milk.
Yeah.
So that's something to think about too. If you're like, "Oh, I want a tandem nurse, I'll just tandem nurse. I'm 6 months postpartum, and you get pregnant, you're likely going to have to figure out some other. That's a situation where you likely will have to supplement."
Yeah. I got an email about this just this week. And I think sometimes that can take people by surprise because they
Yes,
aren't
because
expecting
people
that.
don't know. They're like, "Oh, tandem nursing, yeah, I'm going to do that." But tandem nursing works, when the first one is a little bit older, because the dip in supply isn't a make or break situation
Yeah.
for them. They're starting to have other things, other food, other liquids, and they can continue to sometimes people have milk throughout their pregnancy, generally not a full milk supply.
Right.
But they can just continue to like comfort nurse or just get the little bit that's there, and they're fine. But if you have a 6-month-old, that's not going to be sufficient.
It's going to be harder. Yeah. And stressful.
Yeah. So think about that too if you're breastfeeding and you're trying to get pregnant right now, wondering where your period is, wondering how you can, get that. Just think about the age of the first one first, and, again, your priorities. What are we trying to do?
Yeah. It's a great way to think about it. So yeah, so that's what I got.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.